Hello, how you doing? It's Phil Thatch, and today I have a new lens to try out. This is the 23mm f1.4 prime lens for Sony APS-C cameras, and it is a pretty nice looking lens. Let's take a look at the features of it right quick. This lens has an aperture ring, and as you can possibly hear, there's no clicks going on with it. It goes from 1.4 all the way to f16, and then it clicks over to A, and then you can control it from inside the camera. That's how I like to do mine. But if you like an aperture ring, this has it, and you can do the non-clicked way, and it has this handy little switch right here. You can flip that over into click, and now the aperture ring is clicked. It's really nice. 1.4, 1.6, 1.8, f2. It's every third of a stop. So that's really nice. There's also a function button on the lens right here, which is pretty cool. And there's another switch, which I believe this switch controls how this lens remote control operates. Now, I'm not going to be messing around with this lens remote control. It's not something I would use at all, but I will tell you that it is available for this lens. And I think you can control the focus of the lens from remote. So that's a pretty interesting feature, not one that I would use, but if you're into that sort of thing, it is available for this 23mm f1.4 Yongnuo lens. There's a manual focus ring, which is focused by wire. Of course, this is an autofocus lens, but it does have the option to control the focus manually, and it is buttery smooth, very loose, not loose like wobbly, just easy to turn is what I'm trying to say. And it has a really nice feel to it. I'm hoping I never have to use it. I'm hoping I'm able to autofocus from the camera and have no need to use that. Up front, there's a 58mm filter thread. Comes with a nice pinch style 58mm lens cap, which fits on there nicely, and there's no chance of that thing falling off unless you really knock the crap out of it. The rear cap has a great feel to it. Sometimes these third-party lenses, the rear cap, in my experience, and I've reviewed a ton of these things, sometimes it will be loose and just not stay on very good. This one right here feels like a Sony cap on a Sony lens. It feels perfect. The lens has 9 aperture blades, so it should have a pretty smooth background. We'll check on that when I'm out in the field. And the mount is metal, so that's good. Nice quality there. Another thing I noticed back here at the lens mount, it has a nice rubber gasket all the way around, so that should give you some nice dust protection, maybe even a little bit of moisture protection. That's really nice. I'm not seeing a USB-C port here on the end like you see on some of these third-party lenses, but I do see a USB-C port right here just below my finger, and it has a rubber cover on it. So if there ever needed to be a firmware update done on this lens, there is a USB-C port for it. But the USB-C port is covered, so there shouldn't get any moisture or dust into your lens or your camera through that USB-C port. Overall, this lens has a really great feel to it. Let's check out the lens hood. Pops right on, looks good. Not too big, not too small, has a nice quality feel to it. Doesn't feel like it'll be falling off. And now, let's take the body cap off of my A6700 and see what this APS-C lens looks like on this APS-C camera. There's the index dot right there. We'll line those up. Do a little twist. Oh, it clicks right into place. Feels good. It's not loose or wobbly in any way, form, or fashion. And this being an APS-C lens, it's 23mm, but the camera is a 1.5 crop, so it'll be right around 35mm full frame equivalent. 34.5 is how the math actually comes out. So if you're looking for a 35mm full frame look in your APS-C camera, this 23mm focal length is the way to go. So I'm going to take it out today for a photo walk here on my A6700 and just do whatever kind of photography I can find to do with it today, and hopefully I'll be able to bring back some results where you can get an idea of what you can and can't do with this lens. So let's take a look right now at that. I was reviewing two different lenses today, so you may see some similar photographs in a different lens review. But this is my good buddy Ray. I stopped by downtown to see him, and I took his picture with this lens. This is wide open at f1.4, 1/640th of a second, and ISO 100. Looks like Ray is pretty sharp, and there is some nice separation between Mr. Soldano and the background. So that is a nice feature of an f1.4 lens. Next, I made a photograph of this crosswalk sign, and I shot this at f1.4, and I took a look at it on the back of the camera, and I said, oh, that looks like it has some color fringing in these high contrast areas between the bright white sign and the black lettering. And sure enough, you can see pink fringing all the way around this. This is at 1.4. So I said, well, let me stop it down a little bit and take another shot and see how it looks. So I made this shot at f2.5. And as you can see, it looks much, much better. Virtually no fringing at all now in this f2.5 shot. But this f1.4 shot shows a lot of fringing in high contrast. So that's something to be aware of. Then I was walking down the street and I saw this gentleman walking towards me, and I ducked into the opening of a clothing store, and he paid no attention to me whatsoever. So I made this shot of him smoking a cigarette and checking out his phone as he went by. This is wide open at f1.4, but based on what I saw looking at that sign a moment ago, I feel like this shot probably would have looked a lot better stopped down to f2 or maybe 2.5. But this is 1.4 and 1/1000th of a second and ISO 500. I often make a shot of this broken light fixture in one of the decorated alleys in downtown Chattanooga, just to kind of get subject separation. And this 23mm lens at f1.4 has lots of nice separation. You can see the background is very creamy and out of focus. This is a 1.4 shot at 1/1000th of a second. I met my wife for lunch. We went down to Buffalo Wild Wings, and we were in a booth that had some indirect sunlight coming through a window and lots of TVs in the background. So Heather made this photograph of me wide open at f1.4, 1/160th of a second and ISO 400. And then we swapped seats, and I made this photograph of her at 1/160th, f1.4 and ISO 400. I do like the separation, and it just looks nice. Good looking photograph out of the lens, but again, I think it might have looked just a little bit better, stopped down just a little, maybe just to f1.6 or f2 might have made it look even better. Then I went across the river to Coolidge Park, and I walked around for a little while, and I made a photograph of the carousel building. There's a carousel inside this building here, and there's a fountain that the kids play in over here on the left-hand side of the frame, and I made this shot at f4. Lots of light. So I was at 1/4000th of a second in ISO 200. And I'm not seeing any flaws like I was seeing in the f1.4 shots. This looks really nice. Then I made an up close shot of the head of the elephant there at the water fountain. Of course, it's in the dead of winter now. The temperature is around freezing today, so they're not running the fountain. But this shot, I've got it stopped down to f2, and it looks really nice. There's not any problems that I'm seeing in this that I was seeing in some of the 1.4 shots. So I think if you just shoot this lens at f2, you can get away with it and have nice looking images. I continued to walk around Coolidge Park, and I thought this golden grass was beautiful, and I made this shot at f5.6 and 1/2000th of a second. I like the dark colored foliage in the background with some beautiful blue sky poking through and the beautiful golden color of the grass. And now I'm going to do some brick wall shots. Man, oh man, look at that barrel distortion. You can see these lines that should be straight are bending outwards on the top and the bottom. So that's what's called barrel distortion. But let's check out the sharpness in the center of the frame. I'll zoom it into 100%. This is at f1.4. Not extraordinarily sharp at f1.4. Let's see what happens when we go down to f2. Wow, it looks a lot better at f2. Let's look at 1.4 is here, and here is f2. 1.4, f2. Just a night and day difference in sharpness. So Definitely stop this lens down to f2 for best results. Now let's take a look at 2.8. There's f2, there's 2.8. It's even sharper still at 2.8. So things are getting better as we move along. I don't think I shot at f4. This next shot is 5.6. So there's 2.8 and there's 5.6. I don't see any difference in sharpness there in the center between 2.8 and 5.6. So that's good. You can get maximum sharpness at 2.8. Here we are at f8. Still looks nice and sharp. Here's f11. A little softer maybe. And there's f16. Definitely a lot sharper a lot softer, because of diffraction. So I recommend shooting this lens for best results between 2.8 and f8, but you can also do f11 and f2 and get nearly the sharpest results from it. But all the way at f16 and wide open at 1.4 are not your best places for sharpness. Now let's take a look at vignetting. This is f1.4. You can see the corners are a pretty good bit darker than the center of the frame. Here is f2. Now they're a little brighter. Here's 2.8, and they are brighter still. I think maybe 2.8 may be the sweet spot on this lens. Then here is 5.6. It's virtually even across the frame. Here's f8, still pretty even. And of course, 11 and 16 will stay nice. So I like this lens a lot at 2.8 and 5.6. I think that's the place to shoot from on this lens. And maybe f2 if you need some good subject separation. Okay, this is a video test of the Yongnuo 23mm f1.4. This is wide open at 1.4. Of course, my shutter speed is way too fast on this bright day with no neutral density filter, but this will give you an idea of how well this lens will focus on the A6700 in video mode and what kind of background look you can expect. And also, let's experiment with how close I can get to the lens. It's supposed to have a minimum focus distance of about a foot. So I should still be in focus right here, which is pretty crazy. What do you think? All right, thanks for watching this quick review and photo walk with the Yongnuo 23mm f1.4 autofocus prime lens for Sony APS-C cameras. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, take a moment, reach down, hit the thumbs up button. That helps me out a lot. And as always, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye-bye.